Good morning. Boy, this is going to be a problem. Welcome to the Indiana State Bar Association's House of Delegates meeting. I'm Holly Harvey, and it is my honor to serve as this year's chair. I call this meeting to order. As you know, many of our delegates are attending virtually. We believe we have the technology and plan in place to manage today's meeting, but we always should expect the unexpected. It's what we've been doing for a couple years now. We appreciate your patience as we navigate this meeting together. With me on the dais are Shalise Tolbert from Gary, our parliamentarian, Secretary Mary Louise Buck from Muncie, and we also have Chair-elect Anka Hinshaw. I would also like to recognize Chief Justice Loretta Rush, who will share an update from the Supreme Court in a few minutes. I want to thank Connor Reporting for their time and efforts to create the verbatim transcript of this meeting. And just a reminder that materials can be found on the State Bar's website. The link was shared with delegates via email. So we begin by hearing from Daniel Sear of Bloomington. Daniel is the chair of the Committee on Credentials and Admissions.
Properly certified, and delegates, and a quorum is present.
Thank you, Mr. Sear. Now we will hear from our Chair of Rules and Calendar, Anka Hinshaw, from Indianapolis.
Good afternoon. Judge Harvey, I move that the calendar as provided be accepted as the order of the day.
Thank you. Do we have a second? Or we have we have the motion. Do we have a second? It has been moved and seconded to approve the calendar. Is there any discussion? All in favor of approving the calendar as the order of the day, please say aye if you are attending in person. Any opposed? Virtual delegates, please vote via the poll that now appears on your screen. Thank you. The calendar is approved. Now we have the privilege of hearing from the president of our president of our association, Clay Miller of Indianapolis.
Well, good afternoon. As I conclude my year as president, I want to begin this annual report with a few expressions of gratitude. First, I should thank my fellow lawyers who recommended and then elected me 3 years ago to begin down the path to lead our association. I've enjoyed the experience immensely, and I shall miss it. I next want to thank our very capable staff, led by Executive Director Joe Skeel, whom you will hear from later this afternoon. Joe's steady and thoughtful management has elevated what he and his staff are doing for our members and made our association a more effective voice for the profession here in Indiana. Thinking back on the past year, I also want to thank our Chief Justice, Loretta Rush. In her leadership of our state's judicial branch, she has set a tone of cooperation and collaboration with the bar, providing opportunities for meaningful input as the court modifies such policies as our CLE requirements or as part of various task forces assembled to improve access to justice, including reforms of the civil litigation process. We appreciate having a seat at these tables, and while we will miss her recently retired colleague, our good friend, our great friend, former Justice Steve David, I am confident that her promotion of a close relationship between bench and bar will continue. Next, I'm grateful to the smaller number of you who took the time to send an encouraging message to me over the course of the past year, whether it was a note of appreciation in response to a particular President's Perspective column in Race Geste, or some other kind words about the ISBA. It's always nice to receive kudos from friends as well as from strangers. I hope you'll keep that in mind as my predecessor takes the role as well. I also want to thank each of you, both here in person and joining us online. We are, after all, a voluntary bar, which means that not only do we have to earn your dues each year, but our ability to do anything meaningful is dependent on the efforts of members volunteering their time. Our collective efforts, drawing from lawyers from across the state, produce a better end result than if policy and programming decisions were confined to a small cadre of paid staff here in Indianapolis. And how gratifying that you've chosen to spend time attending today's House of Delegates meeting here. Thank you for your commitment to your Bar Association. You are essential to our continued vitality and viability. Speaking of viability, this is, after all, an annual report, and I am pleased to report that your association finished the past fiscal year in the black. This result was achieved through a combination of careful budgeting and, and Executive Director Skeel's stewardship of the association's finances. On a related note, yesterday your Board of Governors adopted a revised investment policy which sets aside a rainy day fund and designates a separate fund intended to generate additional non-dues revenue to better take advantage of when market conditions are favorable. ISBA programs, both in person and online, attracted more than 12,500 registrants this past year. And not surprisingly, the trend line for social media follows and likes, which we track, was positive. We can do more and better, but it is encouraging to see growing numbers of members taking advantage of our growing library of online CLE programs, now numbering about 80 courses from which to choose from the convenience of your desktop or other device. Those of you who had lunch today at our new state headquarters know that we have also upgraded what we can offer members in terms of physical space in downtown Indianapolis. Although the ISBA office has downsized from our longtime location in the Regents Tower, the new digs not only represent a more efficient use of resources for staff spaces, but utilize the latest technology to enhance the availability of sections and committees to meet both in person and online. If you haven't yet visited, please make plans to stop by the Capitol Center. We're located on the 12th floor of the South Tower. Turning next to our strategic plan, which was adopted late last year, or actually late in the previous term, we had 4 areas of focus: advocacy, education, equity and inclusion, and sections and connections. Following a detailed roadmap in each of these areas, your association has made progress to focus in ways we hope you agree adds value to your membership. Although the staff is charged with implementing the direction set forth in the strategic plan, your Board of Governors met quarterly to conduct the business of the association, including evaluating progress on achieving the goals in the plan. I want to note that we made a point of having at least half of our meetings outside of central Indiana. After our January meeting at Fort Bend in the Indianapolis suburb of Lawrence, we held our April meeting at Notre Dame Law School and the adjacent stadium. It was nice to see so many members from north central Indiana attend the reception we held there afterwards. For our July retreat, we traveled to historic New Harmony in far southwestern Indiana. Can't get much further away from anywhere, north at least, to get down to New Harmony, but what a great experience that was. There should be no question that we are truly a statewide organization with members in each of our 92 counties in Indiana. Let me next say a few words about the scope of our activities. Your bar association can add value throughout the course of your career. Now, I recognize virtually everyone in the room who isn't paid to be in the room already has your JD degree and is presumably active in the practice of law. Maybe a few retirees. While I can't claim cradle-to-grave activities, we are involved even before law school. In close partnership with our good friends at the Indiana Bar Foundation, we have developed, sponsored, or actively supported such initiatives as Kids Election and We the People to help educate junior high and high school students about the law, democratic processes, and constitutional principles. Your state bar recently co-sponsored the 25th anniversary celebration of the Indiana Conference of Legal Education Opportunity, a program of our Supreme Court created by former Chief Justice Randy Shepard and continued with the current court that has helped swell the ranks of attorneys from underrepresented populations and made our bar more diverse than ever. We maintain an active presence in all three of Indiana's law schools, providing opportunities for involvement and exposure to practicing lawyers even before you take the bar exam. One of my predecessors in this role, Eric Chickadance from Fort Wayne, was instrumental in establishing the Leadership Development Academy. That was in 2012. This year, we saw the graduation of our 10th class of early to mid-career lawyers who are already having a positive impact in their respective communities across the state as well as within the bar. I believe we have a few LDA graduates in the audience. If you would, please raise your hand if you've been through that program. Wonderful, look at that. And if you're interested in LDA, either for yourself or for a younger colleague, or maybe an older colleague, please reach out to Kristen Owens of our staff. Is Kristen? Not here at the moment. Or Yvette LaPlante from Evansville. Where did I see Yvette? There she is, thank you. Or any one of those who you saw raise their hands can answer questions about their experience. We'll be selecting the next class of 20 or so lawyers, and the deadline to apply is November 1st. It's a great program. Judge Phelps is actively involved as well, and I think you've already organized the graduation ceremony? All right. Well, wherever you are in your legal practice, your bar association can be an invaluable resource. We have more than 24, actually 28, sections devoted to specific practice areas ranging from appellate practice, bankruptcy and creditors' rights and criminal justice to probate, trust and real property, taxation, and my personal home for the last 2 decades, utility law. We also support the work of an equal number of standing committees engaged in ongoing topics relevant to the practice of law. I want you to be aware that just yesterday, your Board of Governors approved a revamped amicus policy, setting forth procedures and guidelines for sections to file amicus briefs in their own name directly with an appellate court, not unlike the way our sections are authorized to advocate in our legislature directly, although I will note that the amicus policy does involve review by the Board of Governors for section briefs. And we have something even to offer our senior lawyers. I'm especially grateful to Ted Wagner of Rochester. Didn't see Ted in the room. He's a regular attendee. Along with John Trimble and Donald Hopper, both from Indianapolis, for helping our membership and membership benefits committee develop resources to assist lawyers with succession planning. Look for more on that front in the coming year. But our questionnaires and the membership committee has done a great job reaching out and finding out what additional needs we can help meet. And this is an area where we found a great deal of interest in developing some resources that would benefit our bar. I have a friend from college who has practiced law for a couple of decades in Montana. He just recently announced that he is winding down his practice, and he's younger than me, relocating to Oregon to embark on a new career. Our profession can be very rewarding, but can also be quite challenging. Lawyer burnout manifests itself in a variety of ways. In response, for some years within the ISBA, we have had a wellness committee, which this past year changed its name to the Well-Being Committee and revised its mission statement to include a focus not just on physical wellness, but on such other dimensions as mental health, career satisfaction, and community engagement. The goal is to advance a more holistic approach to dealing with the pressures of life as attorneys. So we are doing a lot, I dare say, as an association to earn your support and involvement. I want to remind us each of the ISBA's stated mission and vision. The mission of your State Bar Association is, quote, to improve the administration of justice and promote public understanding of the legal system. And our vision to carry out that mission is, quote, to serve and advocate on behalf of our members, their clients, and the public interest as the independent voice of the legal profession, close quote. A worthy mission, and I submit a bold vision, to make Indiana a better place in which to live and work. Indiana's Civic Health Index paints a troubling picture of disengagement and apathy among our citizens. Lest anyone think that's their problem or that low voter turnout just increases the currency of your own voice and vote, I suggest that such long-term thinking is not in our collective long-term interest. What's the connection to the ISBA? Well, I think that was reinforced for me in part earlier this summer. I attended the Indiana Lawyer Breakfast where they honored a number of different lawyers, including presented a Lifetime Achievement Award to U.S. District Judge Sarah Evans Barker. In her moving acceptance speech, Judge Barker observed that, quote, the bonds that connect us to one another as lawyers and as judges within this profession impose a special obligation as well as a unique opportunity to find ways to keep our republic strong and functioning when times of stress and conflict arise within the body politic. She then described lawyers and judges as, quote, the trustees of the truth-seeking process that places primacy on facts and evidence in accordance with fairly enacted and faithfully enforced principles of law, close quote. In such time as these, she went on, the work we do as lawyers is more important than ever. Wherever truth is devalued, we lawyers have important work to do. When the promise of an ordered society capable of righting past wrongs and injustices for those who have been or are being treated unjustly is viewed as neither relevant nor possible, we lawyers have important work to do. And when the practices of politics overtake the noble role of civility and statesmanship, we lawyers and judges have our work cut out for us. This special obligation, she continued, that is ours will not permit us to shrink from these tasks nor to withdraw from the battle lines. And if we do, we place our entire country in peril. It will be, as it always has been throughout history, the work of lawyers preserving and protecting the rule of law, hopefully, will see us through, close quote. As usual, the good judge doesn't mince words. Well, I'll conclude my remarks by reiterating what a privilege it's been to lead the association over the past 12 months, but it's also a privilege, I think I must note, to be a lawyer. Our clients entrust to us Our clients entrust us to help them navigate a wide range of matters of significance to them. We get a front row seat to observe both the worst and the best of humanity. And whether we're called upon to right wrongs or protect commercial interests or provide advice on all manner of personal and business matters, it is a stimulating, challenging, and hopefully rewarding way to earn a living. I feel lucky to be a member of our profession, and even luckier to have had the opportunity to lead our association this past year. Later this afternoon, I'll hand over the gavel to my able successor, Amy Noe Dudas, Richmond, and I know we'll be in good hands under her stewardship. To again quote from Judge Barker, we lawyers do indeed have important work to do. With your help, we can do it. Thank you for your attention, and thank you for your participation in the work of your State Bar Association.
Thank you, President Miller. Twice a year, the Indiana State Bar Association sends representatives to participate in national conversations taking place at the American Bar Association's House of Delegates. I'd like to invite Steve Hoare of Evansville to share an update on behalf of the Indiana delegation.
Thank you, Judge Harvey, Chief Justice Rush, members of the court, my fellow delegates. I'm standing in today for Melissa Avery, who is the state delegate for our Indiana delegation, but I'm pleased to give to you today a report of the American Bar Association's House of Delegates activities. First, I want to explain a little bit about the House of Delegates, then I'll fill you in on what happened there this year. Each state delegation is headed by a state delegate who is elected by ABA members in the state, and again, that's Melissa Avery from Indianapolis. State bar associations are entitled to a number of delegates based on the number of lawyers in that state, and the ISBA has 5 delegates. The president and president-elect are always delegates, so President Miller and President-elect Dudas have been delegates this past year. The Young Lawyers section appoints a delegate, and that delegate this year was Cliff Robinson from Rensselaer. And the Board of Governors appoints the 2 remaining delegates. Chantre Irving from Lake County and I are the board-appointed delegates. Local bars of a certain size also receive delegates. In Indiana, the only local bar that's big enough to have a delegate is the Indy Bar, and that delegate is Phil Eisenberger. Also, delegates from other entities who are from a state where they live are also considered part of that state's delegation. So, for instance, Judge Robb of the Indiana Court of Appeals is a delegate from the Appellate Judges Conference, and so she's a part of our Indiana delegation. And then finally, Chris Hickey from Indianapolis just completed a term on the Board of Governors, and so she was also a delegate and a part of our Indiana delegation. In total, the ABA House of Delegates has 600 members, and 2/3 of them represent local, state, and special focus bar associations. So it's really the majority of the House of Delegates is really focused on bar association representation. Other delegates come from ABA sections, and still others from various law-related groups, such as the Association of Law Schools. The House of Delegates is the legislative body of the ABA. It sets the policies of the ABA and elects the Board of Governors and the officers. Most of the work that the House of Delegates does involves the consideration of resolutions that have been sponsored by ABA sections and committees, bar associations, and other entities. Resolutions can cover a variety of topics. So, for instance, there might be resolutions that deal with ABA governance. There might be resolutions that are seeking to approve proposals from other ABA entities, like when the model rules of professional conduct are changed. Most resolutions urge governments to take certain action or pass proposed legislation. The House of Delegates meets twice a year at the annual meeting in August and at the mid-year meeting in February. Now, the ABA House of Delegates is jam-packed. To give you an idea, at the annual meeting this year, 44 resolutions were considered. Here's just a sample of some of the issues that were addressed. Gun control. There was a resolution that urged legislation providing law enforcement reasonable time to perform background checks. Elections, which has been a big topic in our country and was a big topic at the House of Delegates for the last several years, actually. There was a resolution that approved updates to the ABA's election administration guidelines to help ensure the integrity of elections and personal security of election officials and voters. Administrative law. There was a resolution that urged establishment of an independent tribunal for adjudication of federal benefits cases. That has an Indiana connection. David Welch, a former Monroe County judge and current federal administrative law judge, was heavily involved in this resolution and spoke to our Indiana delegation about it. But the most discussed topic was professional independence, which is embodied in Rule of Professional Conduct 5.4. Under that rule, lawyers may not share fees with non-lawyers, and non-lawyers may not have ownership interest in law firms. The principle behind Rule 5.4 is that lawyers' duties are to their clients, and to maintain that professional independence, lawyers should not be controlled or influenced by non-lawyers who do not have the same duties to clients and whose financial interest might not align with the client's best interest. Rule 5.4 has become a hot topic in recent years because of the rise of companies like LegalZoom and Rocket Lawyer. It's also a topic of discussion because of the large gaps in access to justice and the many unrepresented litigants in this country. Some states are experimenting with revisions to Rule 5.4. For example, Arizona repealed its Rule 5.4 and established a licensing system for, quote, alternative business structures, end quote, that allow for non-lawyer ownership and management. Utah has created what's called a, quote, regulatory sandbox, end quote, through which law practices may be owned and managed by non-lawyers. In addition to these developments at the state level, there are groups within the ABA that are pushing for changes. There are also contingents in the ABA that want to see Rule 5.4 strongly protected. These groups believe that Rule 5.4 is under attack and think it's necessary to reaffirm the core principles in Rule 5.4. To that end, these groups, which include the Illinois State Bar Association, the New York State Bar Association, and the New Jersey State Bar Association, proposed Resolution 402, which stated that the sharing of legal fees with non-lawyers and non-lawyer ownership or control of law firms are inconsistent with the core values of the legal profession. This resolution was discussed at your Board of Governors, the Indiana State Bar Association's Board of Governors, and the board recommended approval of the resolution, meaning approval of the reaffirming that core principles of the legal profession include not sharing fees with non-lawyers and not allowing non-lawyer ownership of law firms. An important consideration for the board, for our board, was that non-lawyer investment in law firms was considered by this House of Delegates in 2016, and some of you may remember that. It was a spirited debate. And the House of Delegates declined to recommend that Indiana allow non-lawyer investment in law firms. Back to ABA Resolution 402 that was taken up at this past annual meeting in August. It was anticipated that there was going to be a great debate between the groups advocating for change and the groups seeking to protect Rule 5.4. There was a lot of activity, a lot of discussion before the actual House of Delegates meeting, and then even some wheeling and dealing during the meeting itself. And in the end, the groups that were opposed to the resolution dropped their opposition, and the resolution passed overwhelmingly. So the status now is that the ABA is on record as supporting the principles in Rule 5.4. So this issue at the ABA has been settled for this instant. It undoubtedly is going to come up again. LegalZoom and Rocket Lawyer aren't going away, and while many are working hard and strides are being made on access to justice, that's a problem that likely isn't going away anytime soon either, and I know we're going to hear from some distinguished speakers later about that and what we're doing in Indiana to address that problem. So I'm sure the issue of Rule 5.4 and professional independence will continue to be hotly debated in the coming years. And your Indiana delegation will continue to seek your input and represent the value of Hoosier lawyers at the ABA. That's my report. If anyone has any questions, I'd be happy to talk to you later. Just catch me. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Now I'd like to invite Chief Justice Rush to the podium to share a report of the Indiana Supreme Court.
Thank you, Judge Harvey. Welcome. It's good to see you all. I want to thanking Director Joe Skeel and President Clayton Miller. Clayton, every time I turned around, you were there. You showed up. I mean, he represented the bar very well. And that brings me to the fact that the court will continue to promote strong partnerships with the bar. I've been an attorney for almost 40 years, and one of the first conversations I had was the president of the Tiffany County Bar Association coming up to me saying, you realize how important bar memberships are. And that stuck with me. I became an officer, and I tell every new attorney that, and I try to include that in my comments every time we swear new attorneys in, but sometimes it takes you tapping a new attorney on the shoulder and saying, you're going to need this. And that's how we grow that strong bar association. So 40 years, I'm a strong believer in it. I see the work that the state bar is doing and local bar, but the state bar, what a busy year you've had. And, you know, open conversations, the growth of LDA, the matter of CLEs, and there's not a time that we're looking at an initiative, a statewide initiative, that we don't pull in the Bar Association. And now as we're learning to build our bench, you know, what does our future to look like? We look to LDA graduates. So when you look at who's involved in a lot of our committees, you will see a smattering. Some of them are probably tired of getting the call, but we need to always do that. When you sign up for the role of attorneys, there's a question now, is there any committee or commission you're interested in? And fill it out, because we need to hear from a wide range of voices, and I look out here and a lot of you do a lot of work, but we need to share that and sort of spread that out and build that bench so it continues to be strong. And that brings me to a thank you with some of the initiatives that we have going on this year. Our Rules Committee, the Innovation Initiative, the Family Law Task Force, the Civil Litigation Task Force, the Technology Working Group, all are working on issues to make our practice ready, more efficient, less expensive, and easier to navigate in the future. So I went and I matched who's here, who signed up to attend this meeting with the ones, because there's dozens and dozens and dozens of practitioners on these committees. But today I'm going to thank the ones that signed up to attend the State Bar. Anka Henshaw, Michael Tolbert, Leslie Craig Hendersaw, Scott Wiley, Candace Williams, and Joe Skill. They're all involved in those groups that I talked about. Then I want to thank those who help us to promote trust and confidence in the justice system and the legal profession by serving on our Disciplinary Commission, Judicial Qualifications Commission, Board of Law Examiners, and Commission for Legal Education. And those that are signed up to attend this, Dan Vinovich, Amy Dudas, which I'm so happy to see another Richmond gal. I graduated from Richmond High School in 1976, so Amy, we're all proud of you back there. Charlize Tolbert, Jacqueline Pillar, we want to thank those. And thank those of you that helped JLAB. Attorney discipline cases are down. Judicial discipline cases are up. Attorney, when you talk about well-being, it's important, the crunch. We have 421 volunteers who volunteer as mentors for the JLAB program. That's pretty amazing. We're really making a push on that. We have taken, as a court, we have taken any question asking about mental illness off. We've taken it off character and fitness. We've taken off the Court of Appeals application. We've taken it off, I'm on the Marion County Judicial Selection Committee. We've taken off that. We've taken off the Supreme Court applications. You wouldn't have to say what your body fat was or your blood your cholesterol, right? So we're not asking that you do it. We had law students that were afraid to get mental health treatment, so they wouldn't fill that out. So we took the question off. It's gone. If you see it anywhere, let me know. We feel very strong. It's okay not to be okay. We've got a robust JLAP in Indiana. Don't be afraid to make the referral. I think I've probably made 10 referrals in my life, maybe more. And I just had an attorney contact me. He's now a JLAP member, and I had to call on him. I had to report him, and now he's 15 years sober, and he's one of our best JLAP and he always lets me know, hey, I'm another year sober. I said, that is fantastic. So I want to thank you, because our profession is a team sport. You know, I'm a big fan of Sarah Evans-Barker, and I loved your comments. Clay, that idea of building trust is so important. The judiciary right now is the most trusted branch of government, but our trust is down 12%. And what do we have? Our currency is public trust. If you don't stand outside that courtroom with your client thinks they're going to get a very fair shake when you walk in, there's something's wrong with that. We've got the equity, we've got the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Task Force that's going to be bringing recommendations. There are probably 100 people working on different ways. And it's never okay for people to think that somebody's got an edge on them in court. So I think that's so important. I want to say right now that the appellate, if you live in Appellate District 2, there are 8 individuals running to represent you on the Judicial Nominating Commission. I looked this morning, and there's about 22% of the possible attorneys that will vote. I think it's so important. Go vote. Currently the members are Bill Winningham, Tony Patterson, Holly Wojak, and talk about the critical roles they play with regard to helping select the candidates to go before the governor on that. So other things happening in Indiana, we had almost 1.1 million cases filed last year. That it was at 1.4 maybe 4 years ago. During 2020, it was 950,000 cases. But 8.2 million documents were filed electronically last year. And we had almost 60 million people go on My Case. Think how far we've come, really. Anybody not use My Case? I found out my son had a traffic ticket that I didn't know about by looking up his name on My Case. So I think it's really helpful. I think that technology, I hope you all know about the attorney dashboard. Having been a practitioner for 16 years, to think that I could go one place and not have to trace down CCSs to find out. You're always worried about the deadline, right? What am I going to miss? So that takes a lot of work. And the work we're doing with court technology, I think it's important. I will tell you that I have a big push this year in our budget for court technology. And when I ask for court technology, it's really your technology. It means a lot I know what overhead is. I was a partner of a law firm. I don't want you to have to be like the federal system on PACER where you have to pay. I don't want you to have to pay to electronically file. I don't want you to have to pay to look at My Case. But all that comes with something. So in fact, I just met with the governor this morning, and I said, we need to not be treated as if we're just another agency. We're a branch of government. Our whole budget is less than 1%. And our budget is, I really see courts as engines of economic prosperity. If you can't get your case decided and done, it ties you up, it ties your client up, and it's so important. So getting them to realize it's public safety if you do criminal law. What we're doing with regard to supervised release system, the pretrial reform, growing problem-solving courts, having good information is key. The governor just asked me, he had a question with regard to how many people have this type of offense, and I go, we can get you that information. So going and building our court technology, we're looking at, I know you're all tired of the spinning wheel. We're working on it. We're really working on our system of electronic filing. We may be building some in-house things that'll help. We probably have 37 different applications that we do, marriage license. We have 1 million protective orders in the protective order registry. We do the Public Defender Commission. We provided their case management system. We're doing it for the administrative law judges. So we really are connected. Right now, a judge in one county can know what's going on in another county by pulling that up. We used to not know with regard to warrants and writs and public safety. So we think that's important. And I'm asking for your help because I think the idea of constantly looking forward to see what our profession is going to look like, we're going to need your help. When I stand in front of that, I had to ask for money when I was a trial court judge, right, Judge Harvey? You remember those times. And I got, and now I'm doing it again. I sit there, I go through meeting after meeting. But I want you to realize the money we're asking for is not so that we get paid more, we have more staff. 100% of our budget goes to, it's not towards, have not increasing staff. We've not had any increase in the last 6 years. The last time the Indiana judiciary received a statewide increase as a separate branch of government was 6 years ago. We did ask for money for the Coalition for Civil Legal Aid, did not get that. We will continue to. We've been receiving the same amount. We now are collecting better data so we can look at unrepresented litigants, and the numbers are high, whether it's a plaintiff or defendant. We've actually developed the technology, even if you're a family lawyer and you want to see how many divorce cases have somebody representing the petitioner versus respondent, we have that information, and we'll have that up on our website so that you can see the percentages and we can see where the needs are there, and I think that's important. We are looking at better ways. We had a civil justice initiative. What do you do with a case? You just file it and you kind of wait for it to go. It can be years. We're looking at front-end case managing cases, triaging those cases, proportional discovery. It shouldn't take a year and a half to get an uncontested divorce. So how do you do that with, we're looking at the family law initiative or the civil justice initiative. We've got some of those out for comments, and I think we're going to really see a different way of doing it. We now know a judge can pull up and see what their backlog, and I will tell you that the judges are working hard. A lot of judges, I mean, the majority of the judges are working extremely hard to get through their backlogs. And those are your cases, and those are your clients whose lives are tied up while they're waiting to get child support or get the guardianship or get the benefits or get their commercial case done. We are making a push for commercial courts. We have 10 commercial court judges. We have about 1,700 cases that have been filed in those. Business-to-business disputes. It's not like business versus little guy. It's business-to-business. And we really want, we all learned in law school about Delaware, right? Everybody loves the business law that comes out of Delaware. Why can't we be Delaware, right? Why can't we have this body of law with these trained for complex cases? And the numbers and the data are just great. You know, temporary restraining orders being done within a month, summary judgment, motion to dismiss, plus those commercial court cases at the trial level, there's now there, you can read those opinions. If you represent a client and you're going into X court and it's on a covenant not to compete or non-compete, has this judge dealt with that before? So we want to make that information more and more available, and I think that'll be exciting. We will soon be launching the Indiana Law course to supplement the adoption of the Uniform Bar. And I need to thank John Maley, Katie Perry, Maxwell Wiley, Michael Tolbert, John Larimore, Andrew Nestrig, Drew Straussneck, and Chris Hickey, and they're going to actually be presenters. So I love the fact we're going to have this Indiana-specific course that all new admittees have to take, and it's our own, the best of our own people that are providing it. So I'm really excited about that. Again, I think, you know, attorney discipline cases were as many filed, were as many as 1,800. It's down to about 200. And I talked to you about the judicial discipline cases being up. We owe you better, so we're working on that. We're rewriting the Rules Committee's been busy. We're rewriting the rules of criminal procedure to make them easier to follow and navigate. There are some substantive changes in there. I believe those are out for comment right now. We're looking at some real lawyer shortages, particularly in rural areas, and what do we do about it? I mean, it's almost like Moneyball. You know, if you want to, you know, have a practice, you know, look at some of these communities and we're aging out. But I worry with regard to Valparaiso Law School being closed. We've lost, I mean, Valparaiso was fabulous law school, so many great graduates. We had a lot of public service attorneys come out of Valpo. So we don't have enough with regard to public defenders, prosecutors, DCS attorneys. The Marion County Public Defender's Office said we have such a crunch. Can you please swear our people in now because we don't have enough people to even represent that come before us. So we will be looking for ways what do we do with the lawyer shortages? We've had 2 law schools close, and where do we go from that? Mental health, both Justice Goff and I have chaired a national committee on mental health, and the sad fact is that the justice system is the primary referral source to get people to treatment. Go figure, right? You really, you know, and what do we not know a lot about? What do we not learn anything about when we go to law school? Substance abuse and mental health co-occurring. So training our judges up. We have a summit next Friday. We have 1,000 people we have teams from every county in our state. We have attorneys, judges, public defenders, prosecutors, community mental health providers, county council, and we're looking at the Justice Reinvestment JREC model on local solutions as we roll out 9.8A. How do we divert people from the criminal justice system? 70% of the people in our jails have a significant mental health issue. So I think there will be a lot of work that can be done, and it's going to take a lot of leadership from our profession. So when I say it's a justice system, that's not just the judges, it's your, it's yours. It's you know your clients. You know that your clients that are struggling with mental health. We travel the state every other year, and we meet with all the judges, and what do they tell us? The mental health cases are just, we're drowning in them with regard to the number of involuntary mental health commitments, but that the mental health needs of people in crisis coming to court have never been so high. So with 988 rolling out, I think we're at a unique time with our profession showing leadership with the other two with regard to our clients and the people that come before us as judges. So we're looking forward to that. We just amended Administrative Rule 14. Remote hearings are here to stay, but we have put some parameters on them. If you have a testimonial hearing, the presumption is you're going to have that live unless the parties agree or other good cause is found. That issue is going to be out for public comment to hear from you. And then finally, in going back to public trust in the system, we have to work together, both the judiciary and the bar, to have them understand the importance of the rule of law in independent judiciary. We can't have people after a court case saying, let's count up how many Republicans or how many Democrats decided that particular case, or is somebody acting as a super legislature. I'm going tomorrow to Helsinki, representing the United States in an international conference of chief justices. I'll be there with the Chief Justice of Ukraine, Kosovo, Pakistan. We have Chief Justice from Africa. We have one from Canada and Finland. And we've had a couple preliminary phone conversations in talking about the importance of the rule of law and what that means to our republic, to the democracy. So it's going to be fascinating to listen to them. I mean, I can't imagine what's going on in the Ukraine with regard to maintaining the rule of law in their country at that. But I hope to bring back some ideas, because it's the goal of your court system, the Indiana Supreme Court, the Court of Appeals, trial court judges, the bar, to work together to instill that trust in the rule of law. Because if that cracks, if we lose that ability of people to think they're not going to get a fair shake with regard to that, or the peaceful dispute and the truth-seeking power of what we do, it's going to be problematic. So thank you all. I'm going to listen to all the reports, and if I have to leave early, it's just because I haven't packed yet. And I always have, do you ever dream that, oh my gosh, I forgot my passport? So thank you for what you do, and thank you for listening to me here today. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Justice Rush. I'm sad to report that we lost several ISBA members over the past year. I direct your attention to the screen as I read their names. Felson Bowman of Indianapolis, Gus Sakopoulos from Terre Haute, Diane Boswell, Gary, Gilbert Masher from Beech Grove, Sam Merkin from South Bend, Michael Morrissey from Fort Wayne, Jeffrey Dorman, Plainfield, John Moses, Indianapolis, Carl Paintner, Blairsville, Georgia, William O'Connor, Highland, Megan Mulford, Indianapolis, Hugh Reynolds Jr., Lake Worth, Florida, John Asbury, Marshall, Jeffrey Sturm from Hebron, Kathy Canny from New Palestine, William Davis, Corydon, Jay Sharon, Morgantown, Albert Steele, Jr., Valparaiso, Nancy Tiller from Schererville, Gregory Huffman, Muncie, Joseph Northrup, Huntington, Robert Yeager, Shelbyville, Michael Caney, Rensselaer, Emily Hunter, Greenfield, Michael Munich, St. John, Harold Dillman from Corydon, Mark 80, South Bend, Russell Hart from West Lafayette, Kenneth Lukenbill Jr., Plymouth, and Linda Clark Degg, Muncie. I encourage in-person delegates to come to the microphone or virtual delegates to request to be unmuted in the Zoom chat to share the names of anyone we may have missed. Yes. Thank you. Thank you.
I have one from Zoom, Edward Burke of Maryville.
Edward Burke from Maryville from the Zoom.
Amy Noe-Dudas from Richmond. John Sayre from Richmond died on November 25th, 2021.
Thank you.
Joseph Costanza from Ogden
Joseph Costanza from Ogden
Dunes.
Dunes. Anyone else? Please join me in a moment of silence to honor their dedication, contribution, and service to the people of Indiana. Thank you. I would now like to invite our friends from the Indiana Bar Foundation to provide a quick update, then lead us in a discussion on some of the new initiatives being implemented and considered by the state's pro bono providers and the Indiana Supreme Court. We will also be asking for your input, as many of these initiatives will have a direct impact on people in your counties. For those of you unaware, improving access to justice through civil legal aid is one of the goals of ISBA's strategic plan. We have been working hand in hand on many of the initiatives you will hear about. Joining us from the foundation are Karen Glaw from Indianapolis, chair of the Indiana Bar Foundation, Judge Melissa May of the Indiana Court of Appeals, and Scott Wiley, executive director of Indiana Pro Bono.
Good afternoon. I'm Karen Glaw. I'm a partner at Faegre Drinker and the chair of the Indiana Bar Foundation Board. It's my pleasure to represent the Indiana Bar Foundation Board and staff here today. The last 12 months can best be described as a cycle of continuous celebration for the foundation. We continue this celebration with all of you today by reflecting on the foundation's vision and the faithful support of our donors, partners, and friends. This past year, our president and CEO, Chuck Dunlap, celebrated his 20th anniversary with the foundation. Those who know Chuck describe him as dedicated, a trusted colleague, determined, and compassionate. The foundation is fortunate to have Chuck's continued leadership. Earlier this year, the foundation received a $13 million contract from the Indiana Housing and Community Development Authority to provide funding for housing stability legal services throughout the state. Through the work of our staff and partners, the foundation has begun to deploy new resources, increasing access to legal services for Hoosiers facing eviction. Most visible will be the placement of 120 legal information kiosks across Indiana. The kiosks will provide access to resources and live legal navigators on indianalegalhelp.org, which is a program of the foundation connecting Hoosiers to legal resources and services. The Indiana Legal Help website has seen over 1 million visits so far this year. The site includes legal forms and instructional videos and offers a statewide calendar of legal advice clinics. Later this afternoon, you'll see how legalhelp.org can help attorneys find pro bono opportunities through the site's Pro Bono Opportunity Guide. Additionally, the foundation recently awarded $2.5 million in grants to 13 civil legal aid organizations around the state through our administration of the Civil Legal Aid Fund and IOLTA program. These organizations provided legal services to over 30,000 low-income Hoosiers last year alone. With sponsorship from the Indiana State Bar Association and Faegre Drinker, the foundation co-hosted our second Indiana Pro Bono retreat with the Coalition for Court Access in Muncie in August. The retreat was an opportunity for nonprofit legal services organizations, private attorneys, court staff, and judicial officers to come together to reflect, share, and plan for what pro bono can be in Indiana. As part of our goal to build a better pro bono system, we look forward to gathering valuable input from you through some live polling and discussion later this afternoon. In addition to its work supporting civil legal assistance, the foundation continues to provide robust civic education programming for students and teachers around the state. This year, we celebrated the 2021 We the People competition by hosting the state finals in person. Fishers High School won the highly competitive state championship and went on to represent Indiana at the national finals, finishing as the national runner-up. Fishers Junior High School won the state middle school competition and participated alongside 3 other Indiana middle schools in the We the People National Invitational. Fishers Junior High School finished in first place, and Fall Creek Junior High School finished in third place. For those of you who were at the section and committee leader orientation earlier today, you saw a demonstration of the We the People program and heard firsthand from students and teachers impacted by this exceptional experience. After a competition starting with 45 teams across the state, the high school mock trial competition concluded with Heritage Christian High School winning the state championship and representing Indiana at the mock trial national competition. Foundation civic education programs impacted more than 10,000 students during the 2021 to 22 school year. 88 Hoosier educators participated in foundation-sponsored professional development, and nearly 2,500 print and e-textbooks were distributed across the state. Our civic education programs would not be possible without the support of attorney volunteers who provide valuable expertise, time, and resources. We are grateful to those in attendance who have partnered with us on We the People and mock trial competitions, and we invite all of you to volunteer as judges for these programs in the future. The foundation celebrated the first year of the Mock Trial Diversity Initiative, presented by Krieg Default. The goal of the Diversity Initiative is to retain, expand, and diversify schools participating in the Indiana High School Mock Trial Program by reducing financial and systemic barriers to participation. The program targets majority-minority schools with a significant population of low-income students. 10 partner organizations provided funding to raise $50,000 to support 8 qualifying Indiana high schools seeking to initiate and sustain mock trial for their students. We are excited to share that our goal is to expand to 14 schools this year. A new program has been added to the Foundation's civic education portfolio thanks to our partnership with the Indiana State Bar Association, Indiana Kids Election. We are excited to share this program with Indiana educators and students to showcase the importance of voting within our democratic system. Supported by 7 partners, the Foundation celebrated publishing the 2021 Civic Health Index. This biennial report provides updates on Indiana's civic health, a snapshot of how active Hoosiers are in registering to vote, voting, and participating in their neighborhood, community, and local government. We have collected 10 years of data referenced in public conversations and media reporting. At the Foundation's inaugural annual meeting and awards luncheon, we had the opportunity to present Justice Stephen David with the Indiana Bar Foundation Legend Award and celebrate his career milestones with colleagues and friends. Educator Janet Charles and attorney Scott Wiley, who you'll hear from in a few minutes, received Indiana Bar Foundation Champion Awards for their dedicated service. During the past year, we've also undertaken a foundation-wide brand refresh, unveiling new logos for the Foundation and the Indiana Legal Help Program. The Foundation also has a new website we invite you to visit at inbarfoundation.org, and please follow us and like us on social media. As the Foundation looks ahead, we are excited by the arrival of the Indiana Legal Help kiosks and the continued expansion of civil legal resources across the state. We look forward to a reinvigorated pro bono network to increase services to those most in need. The Foundation looks forward to expanding civic education programs with the addition of Indiana Kids Election and through the expansion of the Mock Trial Diversity Initiative. Most of all, we celebrate our partners, donors, supporters, and friends. Without your support and collaboration, the Foundation would not be the statewide leader in civic education and civil legal assistance. Today, especially as we focus our efforts on building a better pro bono system in Indiana, we need your ideas and guidance. As I know you'll hear from our next speakers, pro bono legal services are vital to an efficient and effective justice system for all Hoosiers, and we cannot do this work without you. Now, it's my pleasure to introduce the Honorable Melissa May, Indiana Court of Appeals. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. Good afternoon. Indiana lawyers have always been extremely cognizant of the need of low-income Hoosiers for legal help. In 1999, in conjunction with the institution of IOLTA, the Indiana Supreme Court set up the Indiana Pro Bono Commission. This commission divided the state into 14 districts, with each district having its own pro bono chair and judicial representative. Each district was funded through IOLTA primarily and set up its own organization and way of providing services to their low-income residents. Every trial judge you talk to will tell you stories of self-represented litigants trying to figure out their way through the legal system. The legal system is not one for the unwary. We use strange language. What's a provisional order? People ask. The non-lawyer has no knowledge of the meaning or importance of that term. Quadro. Even family lawyers shy away from that one. Well, those self-represented litigants who venture into court without any assistance make it much more difficult for trial courts to manage their dockets in a timely fashion. Although judges differ, I think you would get an agreement that it takes at least twice as long for a hearing with a self-represented litigant than with a lawyer, and some of the trial judges I've talked to said 4 times as long. The Indiana judiciary, particularly our Indiana Supreme Court, has been extremely active in trying to meet the legal needs of those who fit into the low-income guidelines, and has expanded that into considerations of low bono, unbundling of services, and other methods to ensure that Hoosiers get the legal help that they need. However, the need for lawyers to help these Hoosiers has outstripped the availability of lawyers to help them. Recognizing that all the pro bono providers needed to work together, our Supreme Court disbanded the old Pro Bono Commission and merged it into the Coalition for Court Access. The Coalition is an umbrella organization with several legal service providers in Indiana represented and meeting to ensure their services and trainings are not being duplicated, and working together to try to expand the number of Hoosiers helped by lawyers. The Indiana Bar Foundation has been instrumental in serving as the center of the coalition, helping organize the groups and monies available to grant to those legal services organizations. In 2020, the civil legal aid funds established by the legislature were transferred into the Bar Foundation hands, allowing grants sought by all legal service organizations to be standardized, as well as ensuring that the reported information gathered in the grant process was standardized. This allows us to track the number and type of cases per county handled by each one of those providers. The formation of Pro Bono Indiana was a natural outgrowth of the coalition's actions to centralize pro bono services under one umbrella, then a number of different separate districts. That was accomplished, and you will hear more about that later, but this has resulted in a statewide organization with local ties and should allow attorneys to be able to assist those self-represented litigants who want representation throughout the state. COVID-19 was extraordinarily difficult to navigate for all of us, but it's left in its wake a very important resource: the availability for trial courts to hear matters remotely via Zoom, or another provider. I prefer Zoom. It also has opened up the availability of lawyers regardless of where they live in the state, to provide services to self-represented litigants not in their district or area. I'm currently chair of the Rural Working Group of the Coalition for Court Access, and there is a huge, huge need in rural counties for legal representation of their self-represented litigants. Many counties are either attorney deserts. No attorneys live or work in those counties, well, maybe other than the prosecutor or judge, and they don't really count for this. Or those counties are quickly headed that way. The only way for those counties to get representation for their self-represented litigants who need help is to look at lawyers from other areas, specifically urban, to assist them. Every judge acknowledges that a case moves quicker and better with at least one attorney involved. And if both parties can have representation, so much the better. This representation can be counsel and advice, meaning the self-represented litigant has the opportunity to talk to a lawyer about their issues, or an unbundling situation where the litigant is represented for a certain part of the case. Many trial judges have told me their experiences with self-represented litigants who have no idea how to fill out the forms necessary to get a divorce or establish a custody arrangement. Even someone assisting them to help fill out those forms would be crucial in making sure that they're filled out correctly and completely and those cases move through the system. Our courts want to do justice, to make sure that the parties leave the court not necessarily with what they want, but what is proper under the law. Given the lack of attorneys in many areas, the only way to accomplish this is to have out-of-county attorneys available and willing to help those low-income Hoosiers who live in those attorney deserts. I have met with a number of rural judges and will continue to do so to see how best we can help their county's lower-income residents. Having more helplines available for people to call in and ask questions, regardless of where those helplines or people are located in the state, is a huge, important consideration. Making sure those judges are capable and their courtrooms are capable of holding a remote or hybrid hearing is also important. It is patently unfair, I believe, to ask a Lake County attorney to drive 12 hours, 6 down, 6 back, to southern Indiana to handle a hearing for a pro bono litigant they are helping, when that hearing could be accomplished via a Zoom link. There's a new rule out for comment from the Indiana Supreme Court on this issue, Interim Administrative Rule 14 for remote proceedings, and I would urge you to look at it and comment in view of an out-of-county attorney trying to assist a rural litigant. Our judiciary has always been willing and ready to help the self-represented litigant through the many crises we have faced in the state. When mortgage foreclosures overwhelmed Indiana, our Supreme Court helped train more lawyers to help those people than any other state. When COVID-19 hit, our Supreme Court acted immediately and set up statewide Zoom licenses in order to allow trial courts to continue their dockets during shutdown. After the COVID-19 restrictions were lifted, and it seemed probable that there would be a tide of evictions, our Supreme Court and the Bar Foundation worked together to set up a way to help landlords and tenants navigate through this difficult time. Even if you are an attorney working in a larger county, many times your practice will lead you into these smaller rural counties. I would ask all of you to go to your judges and ask, what can I do to help out? It might be as simple as answering a question that a litigant has, or helping fill out a custody worksheet for someone who has no clue how to do so. Indiana lawyers have always stepped up. Our Indiana judges will too. Our Supreme Court and the Bar Foundation have put into place the foundations for doing so. Now it is all our jobs to build on that foundation to ensure that all low-income Hoosiers who need assistance can receive help. This concludes my report on our judiciary and their support of pro bono and legal support to low-income Hoosiers. I now have the pleasure of introducing our next speaker, Scott Wiley. And he is very concerned about what I'm going to say. I know this, but I'm going to be nice. Scott has been actively involved in pro bono services and is currently Executive Director of Pro Bono Indiana. I think it is fair to say that without Scott, Pro Bono Indiana would not have been up and I count Scott a friend and happily turn the microphone over to him.
Thank you for that warm welcome. I was going to use the microphone and walk a bit, but I'm not touching this damn thing. I'm not going to move it. I'm going to stand still. I'm going to hold my hands on the podium. We used to be able to send people to the moon, and PowerPoint never works, and microphones. And I'm sure the battery will go out. So for our colleagues who are watching online, thank you for being with us today. And I want to let everyone know that my first duty today is to tell you how in the world to participate in a poll. I'll do that in a second, but I just wanted to give you a brief personal observation real quick. I started law school in 1985, and there were 9 women in my class at the University of Illinois, a Big Ten state university, not a private university. 9 women. And I'm so proud to be standing here in front of a room where every person behind me is a woman. Our new president is a woman, and I'm looking at the 3 people who just spoke recently who filled the front row. And my colleague from Bloomington and I are the only men that have been speaking. And what a wonderful privilege for all of us. I mean, that is a wonderful piece of progress. So I'm going to see if I can figure out which way's up and down here. Oh my God. So there are 3 ways that you can participate in the poll. If you are my age or older, pull out your abacus, and we'll be sliding little pieces of wood over based on what level we're doing. But for the rest of us, you can either use your computer. If you use your computer, you see what is on the screen. You go to pollev.com/ISBA 856, and you will do that on your browser. If you are using your telephone, you are going to dial, put in 22333, and then in the message, you're going to write ISBA 856. You will get a return message. Do not click on the link for the return message, as many of you may have already done, because it will merely take you to the website of the vendor who has sold us this probably terribly expensive piece of software that we're using today. So just ignore that return message. Once the poll appears on the slide, you're just going to be sending either by entering in your message box or putting a text in. So the fact that they asked me to talk about any level of technology is such a humorous thing to me. Who knows? So I'm going to give you some brief history. As Judge May and Karen both very ably did, Indiana was somewhat late to the pro bono game. We were the 54th jurisdiction in the United States to adopt IOLTA to fund pro bono. And you think, my, how could that be? There are only 50 states. Well, we can count Guam and American Samoa as some of the jurisdictions that came in before we were the 50th of the 50th states to do so. And because of that, our system was created rather late. I always like to say that was because we want to see everybody work all the kinks out first so that we can merely take the program and be successful from the very beginning. But what that meant is we created, as Judge May mentioned, 14 individual programs across the state, each of which had by the way, their own accountant, their own insurance policy, their own person doing everything. We were spending between 40 and 50% of our money on administrative overhead. And so with the help of the State Bar and the Supreme Court and the Coalition for Court Access, we made a decision to come together in 2018 to determine if there was a better way to more efficiently deliver those services so we could take the money that we had through the IOLTA program and we could then put it to use by helping Hoosiers rather than paying 13 accountants to do 990s. And so we came together at DePaul in Greencastle, and one of the proposals that came from that was the merger of our then remaining 12 programs because we, as funding had dissipated, we had lost a few. And that was the emphasis that eventually went to the Supreme Court after recommendation of the Coalition for Court Access to create what is now Pro Bono Indiana. We have offices across the entirety of the state. All of the programs in the state, except our colleagues in Fort Wayne, have joined. And our colleagues in Fort Wayne are dear and wonderful partners, and we operate as a single system for all intents and purposes now. What that then meant is we had to put all that together, and as you can imagine, we got that accomplished so that we could start on January 2020. And then just a few months after January 2020, I was going to get to hire the new staff. Oh, that's fun. I got a soundtrack, cool. I was going to get to hire our new staff so that I could run the new program. I was going to hire that person in March of 2020 when we gave birth to Pro Bono Indiana. So I tell people, I've told people for a long time, and I'll just talk louder until the microphone comes back. What you do, this is probably like when you're at the U.S. Supreme Court and like Mrs. Ginsburg would turn off the button. So I'll just stand really, oh, am I back? Am I back? I'm still not back. Okay, well, I'm just going to come out and yell really loud until we know the microphone. Oh, what's I have no idea. Oh, we're back now. No idea where I was. No. So when we created Pro Bono Indiana, it was one of those circumstances where it was a really ugly little baby. And now it's grown up to be a really ugly toddler. But what we have decided to do is we came together in Muncie a few months ago to do what we had hoped we would have been able to do earlier, and that was come together as the Indiana State Bar Association, Coalition for Court Access, our partners at the court, our partners at the Indiana Bar Foundation, who are our organizational entity that is kind of stewarding our whole operation, and come together and really work on, now that Pro Bono Indiana had been created, how do we recreate the program design, the design of our system to meet the needs of Indiana State Bar Association members who wish to volunteer? How do we now take the data that we can for that? And that's what we're here to do today. You know, the idea that I could get in front of the thought leadership of our entire profession, including judiciary and lawyers, to be able to seek information and input on how we do this program design, so we are able to do it in a way that most efficiently serves the needs of Indiana's low-income community, is such an opportunity for us. And I am so thankful of your willingness to give this time and to very thoughtfully do, because we have put together quite a bit of data in the last half dozen years on client need, what the courts need, who's appearing in court, and who's appearing represented and not. The data the Chief Justice talked about is there, but it's almost all about our client base and who's utilizing the judiciary. We have no data on attorney preference. We have no data on how you and all of our colleagues want to volunteer. What are the methods? What are the platforms? And so that's what we're going to be asking you about today. So what you see in front of you is our new statewide delivery system. We now have the ability in the state of Indiana to do something we never could before. Before we merged our programs, if someone in Muncie had a DUI 10 years ago, and they were in Vanderburgh County 10 years ago and had the same DUI, we couldn't do their expungement because the pro bono programs couldn't share clients, and you have to do it within 1 year because our case management systems were different. We couldn't conflict check. ILS, we couldn't conflict check if our lines of our offices didn't match. All of that's gone. We have the ability now that no matter where we are in the 82 of 92 counties that are fully integrated, if there is a victim of domestic violence in that community and his or her partner gets to Indiana Legal Services first, those individuals now can be instantly, by a push of a button, sent to the pro bono program. It's the first time that's ever been able to do in the state of Indiana. And I cannot tell you how important that is in our rural communities. Because the reality in our rural communities, oftentimes Indiana Legal Services and what is now Pro Bono Indiana are the only providers. Only in our urban areas do we have multiple providers that make it easier. So this is a very important improvement in the state of Indiana. Now, the first thing I want to talk about is the platforms by which we communicate with you. This is an example at indianalegalhelp.org. By the way, I use this. Our poor judges in Vanderburgh County were so sick of seeing my handwriting, and it's so nice that it's all now beautifully done on PDF, and they can't tell I did it. But the reality is this is the primary tool that we are using to provide assistance to self-represented litigants. But also, look, there's also the chat box comes up on mine. Hi, Dan. So there's a volunteer opportunity link now on this system. This is one of the many examples of online portals that allow volunteers to consider volunteer opportunities. And I'll show you here, this is an example of what you go to. This is the Pro Bono Opportunity Guide that Indiana Legal Help has on it. For example, when I came up yesterday, I got up a bit early for the bar. I could have looked on this guide to see if there was a clinic going on in Indianapolis yesterday, and I could have volunteered for it by pushing a few buttons on this site. It's that intuitive and it's that easy. And so what you have is something like this. This is the page that would come up. You might say, I want to do eviction or housing volunteering. You click on that link and this type of stuff comes up. What you see here is examples of clinics that are happening across the state. Many of these, by the way, paid for by that new grant from the Indiana Housing and Community Development Authority. That is going to build a system using these kiosks and other electronic tools and navigation that after that grant's over, those pipes will still be there. And those pipes will open up to domestic violence and custody and divorce and all of the other matters that low-income Hoosiers struggle as they go through the court. So literally, next time you come to Evansville to join Judge May and I in the best bar association in the entire state, next time you come down there, you can click on a Vanderburgh County link before you come to see if there's a volunteer opportunity, because I know that's what each and every one of us wants to do when we come to visit Evansville. By the way, if you also want a really nasty 19-year-long custody case, I'm happy to place one with you. So here is our first poll. By the, I always love when I used to tell people, oh, would you take this? It's going to be a simple divorce. As we all know, there is no such as, this is the first one. And what you do is literally you just text the letter. Just text and look at all, see what it's doing already. Oh my goodness, how fancy. And our folks at home do this as well. If you didn't hear the instructions earlier, if you're on your laptop, it's pollev.com/ISBA 856. And if you're doing the text, you just put in your text dial 22333 and then put ISBA 856. By the way, this is the data that we are going to have to use that will help us as we go through the post pro bono conference decision-making on how we go about doing program design. This is the data that will help us do that in a more smart way. Online portals often, I was recently at a conference in Kansas City where it was where we had a whole session on online portals, and it was very interesting the kind of generational division of who felt comfortable using these types of tools. As I mentioned, I am doing my poll on an abacus, so I'm actually, I'll put likely. But the reality is a lot of times these newer tools are things that those of us who are used to picking up a telephone that actually was attached to the wall may have a little trouble with because they're new and they're different. But building these into the system to ensure that all generations of Hoosier lawyers have the ability to enter pro bono service through the method that is best for them really allows us to expand that army of people that the State Bar has to serve people's needs. So I really thank you for doing that. Now, speaking of that, not only do we have all kinds of new platforms, and in fact, the Indiana State Bar Association getting ready to launch the Pro Bono Academy, the work that Dana's been working on and all the staff of the bar, all kinds of new ways to get training, to do wonderful things that we're building at the Indiana State Bar Association. But what we're going to talk about next are some of the new platforms that we are using for volunteerism. And I'm going to tell you, this is how my type A personality makes it through most meetings. And had I not been speaking today, on my computer would have been this website, which is our Indiana Free Legal Answers portal. This is our computer-based version of Talk to a Lawyer. Hoosiers across the state can post a question on this website. And they will then, that question will be there. And attorneys can open this up at any time. And any of you, all of you who are practicing attorneys can sign up for this, and you can do questions whenever you have any extra time. I use mine when I'm at meetings and trying not to be bored. Sometimes I use it when somebody canceled on me and I don't know what to do with myself. But you can do meaningful work that assists the judiciary and the civil legal aid system by preventing people needing to use the court or calling and doing an intake into our civil legal aid system. Every person that we triage and assist through platforms like this make our system move more efficiently. Judge May talked about the 4 times the length. When we started our family law clinic, clinics are another example of the new platforms we're using. In Vanderburgh County 12 years ago, it took 2 years to convince our judges to accept the money from the family court project because they were fearful, and our bar was fearful, if we offered services to low-income individuals by helping them in clinics, rich people would all stop hiring lawyers and would instead try to sneak in and pretend they were poor so they could fill out forms. I always referred to that as the Home Depot problem where, you know, I've just never ever seen a really rich person sitting in front of a Home Depot on a chair looking at how to tile their own bathroom. The reality is it's just not a real concern, but it was. But what we found is the average litigant that was sent by a judge to the clinic to get help with their family law forms was on their 4th continuance. That meant 4 15-minute hearings that went missing, that the person directly behind them didn't get, that victim of domestic violence didn't get a hearing until the next day because that empty hearing was worthless. And what we found after 1 year, every single person had come from the judiciary. They didn't have a single continuance if they went to the clinic first. A wonderful example of attorney volunteerism doing 2 things: ensuring that low-income litigant got the actual judgment they deserved and real justice, as Judge May mentioned, but also 4 extra hearings for the family law court, so that that poor judge who was in family court that month was able to more efficiently serve other individuals that needed a higher level of judicial engagement. So all of these different models, computer online, telephonic remote, serving client Zoom, and I will tell you, I hated every bit of this pandemic. I'm a fairly social guy. I did not care to not be social. But the one thing I want to take forward is the ability for that low-income litigant not to have to give up a half day of work for a pretrial conference that will last for 5 minutes. Surely we can figure ways to allow that low-income litigant to take their 15-minute break, go stand in a room at work, and not lose a half day of work. And I will tell you, I was so proud of our judiciary. We did very early, you know, we had one of the best responses of any state in the nation. And I love when we first did telephone. In Vanderbilt, we thought we were being so cool. We're being so cool and progressive. We're really doing this great thing. And we started doing it. We'd have the whole cattle call come on at 9 o'clock. And then at 9:45, when we finally called you, you'd run out of your minutes because you had a go phone from Hux. So the reality is we're learning new things all the time about how we can more efficiently do this. But all these tools that we have now, and don't forget the real one, please, oh please, take that divorce from me when I ask you, please. Because I only try to place the ones that really need a lawyer. But the folks that can use these other tools, your time spending 2 hours at a clinic might help 10 litigants successfully fill out their paperwork and be able to obtain a simple divorce. That is a meaningful way to volunteer, and it's so different. You know, our rules were always kind of based on that one case, one lawyer. We have all kinds of new ways. So we're going to ask you, this isn't just one of the examples of that, but here's your next poll. And these are what types of pro bono opportunities are you most interested in? So think about yourself. Which of these, and by the way, you can do more than one. And you can do a single letter and then do another text, or you can do a single letter and a space and then another letter. I will tell you, before the pandemic, I spent 25 years in civil legal aid services trying desperately to figure out how we would serve people in Lagodi. Lagodi's a little town in Martin County. It's a complete legal desert. They have no attorneys. The county's judge sits in the basement of a bank because they have no courthouse. It is a small, little, rural county in southern Indiana. And I always thought how awful for that woman who got punched in the nose that has no one to help her get a protective order. And I think now I can sit in my kitchen in Evansville and talk to her. All she got to do is go to the library and get on a computer. We've got marvelous tools, and thank you. I will tell you this, these types of things really help us understand how we can best do it. And for those of you who are at home and who are doing that, please chime in as well. The service to Indiana Hoosiers who are low income and who are in need is a challenging circumstance. And I will tell you that the last 2.5 years have become more so. The mental health and stress that has been placed on low-income Hoosiers during this time has made serving people more challenging. It's a reality. I always used to tell people, a low-income litigant is no more difficult to deal with than the person that's paying you $425 an hour and thinks you should be available 24/7. They all come with different needs. They all come with different demands. But if we learn in these circumstances where our best areas where we can volunteer, where we can do the most work, every one time we do that, it takes more stress off of our communities. As I've watched the eviction crisis for the last 2 years, no one in their right mind thinks that's healthy for our communities. And our courts stepping up to make sure that they are offering the alternatives. Wonderful way for attorneys to volunteer is to assist in mediation for landlord-tenant work that our courts are informing litigants is available to them. The eviction deferral programming that the Supreme Court created at the height of the pandemic and has revised several times has kept dozens and dozens of people in almost all of our, especially urban counties, housed and helped made landlords whole. It's a perfect example of win-win justice. It's like our therapeutic courts. It's so important. Ooh. Oh, it's Loretto. No wonder. Okay. So this is the next one. I'm going to just let me preview this before you start typing in. One of the challenges that we often find when we're doing pro bono work is that the support is necessary to do that. One of the program design challenges we've had in Indiana is before Pro Bono Indiana was created, we were 48th in the United States in funding for civil legal aid services. We're now up to, I believe, 43rd. But we were 48th. And I do not like that our colleague states are members of the former Confederacy. Only Arkansas, Mississippi, and Alabama hovered below us. And as we build this new system with this influx of resources that's going to move us way up on that list, I'm so I'm like a little bit competitive. I just want to maybe beat, I don't know, Oklahoma. But the reality is we've got this humongous investment right now. And as we build these tools to make sure that, some of you are way ahead of me, put in the words that you think would help you most to do pro bono service. So if you're a banking attorney, you may need training. If you're a banking attorney, you may need someone to hit you on the side of the head and say, anybody can do a rent and damages hearing. Don't tell me that. You may need a lot of things. We want to know what those are. And we're using this fancy word cloud, isn't that? But we'll have real data on what you actually do percentage-wise as well. Training, mentorship. And by the way, mentorship has been talked about a lot during the conference. We were down in the section and committee chair orientation. It was talked about a lot. That is one of the #1 ways you can volunteer to do pro bono. There are all kinds of brand new attorneys who are wanting to learn areas of the law. And the opportunity to talk to a senior attorney or a member of the bench on tools and skills to do that, it's a wonderful way to volunteer. It also means you don't have to take the terrible family law case. But the reality is that mentorship is so important. And many of our folks who are coming out of law school right now, as the Chief Justice mentioned, the loss of our 2 law schools and the fact that the law schools that remain, quite frankly, if you graduate at Notre Dame or you graduate from IU, the chances of you staying in Indiana, especially staying in Indiana and going to a rural community, are pretty low. Right now, the vast majority of lawyers we're recruiting in Evansville are from Carbondale and Kentucky. And the reality is those folks aren't as familiar with Indiana rules and Indiana things. So your mentorship is wonderfully helpful in making sure that we're able to do that. Our ability to pre-screen clients is improving dramatically. I want to thank John Larimore and the folks at Indiana Legal Services. They use their own money to fund the case management system that Pro Bono Indiana has in order for us to have the same system be able to transfer cases back and forth in an efficient manner that didn't require new intakes or requiring traumatized individuals to return and have to redo an intake just because they got transferred to the pro bono program. There are all kinds of new efficiencies that we're doing. Over the next several months, those of us who led and worked with the ISBA and the court and the Indiana Bar Foundation and our other partners at the Pro Bono Retreat are going to be working on solid proposals on how we reorganize the pro bono delivery system now that we have a statewide system. This information you have provided us today is going to be part of that and a vital part. So your efforts today and your work today, other than listening to me and a squeaking microphone, is I hope that you will feel part ownership in those changes and know that this little bit of time that we spent today will help ISBA members for decades better and more efficiently serve individuals in need and making our community safer and stronger. Before we finish and end up, which I think we're pretty close on time, does anybody have any question or comment that they might want to add to anything that either Judge May or Karen or any of the rest of us did before I turn it back to Karen? Does anyone have a question? Okay, well, we want to thank you. I'm going to turn it back over to Karen, who's going to close her remarks out.
How lucky are we to have Scott Wiley, Judge May, the Indiana Supreme Court leading these efforts on civil legal aid and access to justice. On behalf of Judge May, Scott, and the Indiana Bar Foundation, I want to express our sincere appreciation for the ongoing partnership we share with the Indiana State Bar Association. Your input this afternoon has been quite helpful, and we look forward to continuing the conversation on our commitment to supporting pro bono together. If our remarks this afternoon have made you interested in any of the programs of the Indiana Bar Foundation, please contact Chuck Dunlap. He's back there in the corner. Or me or anyone who has spoken today, and our friends at the State Bar certainly can get you in touch with us, and we'd love to plug you into any of our programming. Thank you again for your support, and I'll turn it back to Judge Harvey.
I'll say that's probably the most entertaining presentation we've ever had. So thank you very much for educating us and seeking our input. I think that's really valuable and helping to improve access to justice in this state. That was really marvelous. So now we actually have an action item. We will now consider a resolution from the ISBA tax section. The resolution, which calls on ISBA to lobby for a pass-through entity tax, is available in your electronic materials. It's also being displayed on the screen. So I invite Matt Anger, Chair of the ISBA tax section, to the lower podium. See here?
Good afternoon. Nothing more exciting than following a fun presentation than talking about taxes. I know you guys are been waiting all afternoon for it. Brief introduction. I am Matt Anger. I am a partner at Ice Miller and the chair of the tax section of the Indiana State Bar Association. And I have with me here the real brains behind the operation of why we're here today, who's Mark Richards, a colleague of mine. And we're here to talk about, as mentioned, the pass-through entity tax deduction. A brief background, and I'm going to hand it over to Mark to go into a little bit more detail, and we can answer any questions then. Back in 2017, many of you are likely aware that there was tax reform legislation passed at the federal level called the Tax Cut and Jobs Act. One lot of different provisions contained in that tax reform bill, but one of them that likely impacts many members in this room and the ISBA membership is what's called the SALT cap, or the $10,000 SALT cap. And what that was is essentially a limitation that individuals on their individual federal income tax return could not deduct more than $10,000 in terms of state and local taxes that they pay. And it impacts anybody across the country. It doesn't matter where you're located. It's if you pay more than $10,000 in state and local income taxes, your tax deduction on your individual income tax return is capped at $10,000. What keeps tax lawyers employed is finding creative ways around new taxes that are imposed. And this is no exception. There were many workarounds or creative solutions that folks have attempted to utilize to get around this new $10,000 deduction. One of which is the pass-through entity tax deduction. And at a very high level, what this is essentially, as many of you are aware, if you're a member or an owner in a pass-through entity, such as a partnership or S corporation, what happens is the income of that entity flows through to individual owners or members, who then pays the taxes on that income on their federal return and on their state tax returns. And if they're paying state taxes on that income, that goes towards that $10,000 SALT cap that I just mentioned. And if you go over that cap, then you're limited. And so one of the workarounds that has been developed across the country is this pass-through entity tax deduction, which essentially allows a pass-through entity to elect to pay the income tax for its owners, its state income tax, at the entity level, instead of it passing through the individuals and then the individuals having to pay that tax on their state taxes. And if it's paid at the entity level, the entity gets a deduction, the individual gets a credit on their return, and it doesn't go against their $10,000 cap. And so it is a beneficial result from a state tax perspective in this $10,000 cap at the federal level. The reason that we're here today is to hopefully obtain approval from the House of Delegates to enact or to authorize the tax section in the ISBA to lobby on behalf of the section and the State Bar Association for Indiana to adopt this pass-through entity tax deduction. 32 other states outside of Indiana have adopted this type of legislation. Indiana has not. And so from our perspective, somebody needs to step up in the state of Indiana to try to enact this type of tax benefit. And since no one else has to date, we thought this the tax section and ISBA would be a good group to do so. Primarily because, number one, for attorneys in Indiana that are in law firms that are pass-through entities, they'll be able to take advantage of this deduction if passed. And second of all, many of our clients are pass-through entities. And so for those individuals that have clients that are pass-through entities, this would also be a benefit to them potentially. And the final thing that I would note before I hand it over for Mark to add his comments as well, the IRS a couple years ago came out with a notice that essentially blessed this type of approach that authorizes legislation by states to utilize this pass-through entity tax deduction. And so we're not here trying to promote a theory that hasn't been blessed by the IRS or that is questionable from a federal tax perspective. So we feel pretty strongly about it, and we hope you will approve this resolution. So I'll hand it over to Mark so he can add in any of his comments, and we're obviously happy to take some questions as well.
Thanks, Matt. I'll be brief. Matt covered kind of the basics. What's interesting here is, again, to go back in what happened back in 2017, there was an ambitious legislation with the TCJA, the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. It was also expensive. And so to help deal with the hit projected by the budget agency, the Trump administration was looking for a place to find some revenue. And so injecting this cap that didn't previously exist helped with the overall cost of the TCJA. It was also perceived at the time that it was kind of a shot at the Democrat-controlled states, primarily New York, New Jersey, California, which are high state tax states, have a lot of people that are high income earners that would be hit by this cap. And so there was a political spin on this, but as Matt mentioned, it really impacts people in all 50 states. And this isn't a workaround scheme that lawyers, accountants came up with. This is something that the states have been the initiators on, trying to find a way to deal with this problem for their constituents. Indiana's a little late to the game. We're one of only 10 states that have not done this in the country. And it actually creates a little bit of a competitive disadvantage for Indiana because we've got contiguous states that have this pass-through-entity tax benefit, and we don't. And it really doesn't cost the state because if the state passes this type of legislation, it's going to save their constituents federal income tax, not state income tax. So it's kind of revenue neutral, for the state of Indiana. The one caveat to that, which is an additional disadvantage Indiana has right now, is if you're a resident of Indiana and you're a partner in a partnership that does business in multiple states, you're paying tax in other states. Now, in Indiana, you pay tax on all of your income for adjusted gross income tax purposes, but you get a credit for the taxes you pay to other states. So if your partnership does business in Illinois and you pay tax in Illinois, you get a credit against your Indiana adjusted gross income tax. Right now, when other states have adopted a PTET and we haven't, your partnership elects the PTET in that state and then the partnership pays that tax instead of you lose the credit. That's the way the current law is interpreted by the Indiana Department of Revenue. So we want to fix that problem and also provide the benefits of the PTET to Indiana residents. This is going to eliminate the competitive disadvantage for Indiana. It's going to save Hoosiers on federal income tax. It's going to make Indiana more competitive. I think it's something that is not only good for a lot of lawyers, but a lot of clients of lawyers here in Indiana. So with that, we'll open it up for any questions anyone has. Everybody loves talking taxes on a Friday afternoon.
Just a question, of the 10 states that you mentioned that have not yet adopted this pass-through tax, has there been efforts in order to achieve that? And if so, what was the opposition that prevailed that it did not succeed? And how do you anticipate addressing that with our legislature?
Sure. And I think you may have received a map, which is the AICPA's map. And as you'll see, the states that have not yet adopted the PTET, they're what I would call kind of low commerce states. They're the North Dakotas and the Idahos of the world. Those might be two bad examples, but you get my point. To my knowledge, I'm unaware of any opposition at the state level. I have not heard anything to that effect. I think it's probably more a case, Indiana could have done this last year, but nobody took the initiative to make it happen last year, and we're trying to do that this year. My suspicion is that's what's happened in those states. It just hasn't been a big enough priority. Anyone else? Any other tax topics you want to talk about?
Jerry Bishop, Lake County. Good job. Move to approve.
Do I hear a second? No.
If there are no questions, I want to thank you very much for presenting that information. Now, do we have a motion for this resolution? Mr. Bishop?
Jerry Bishop, Lake County, move to approve the resolution as is.
Thank you. We have a second. So, Ms. Buck, has the board considered this?
This yesterday at our meeting and voted unanimously in favor of it.
Thank you. Is there any discussion on the motion? The motion is, as restated, is support for the resolution. Are you ready for the question? All in favor of the resolution, please say aye if you are attending in person. Any opposed? Virtual delegates, please vote via the poll that now appears on your screen. Thank you. The ayes have it. The motion is passed. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think I can safely say that the last couple of years have seen a dramatic transformation in the practice of law. One of the biggest shifts we have seen and challenges we face is in the legal workforce. You may have heard the terms great resignation or great reassessment. ISBA Executive Director Joe Skeel has been studying this issue and will share with you not just some trends occurring in the legal profession, but also some strategies to address the current climate.
Thank you, Judge Harvey. Delegates, thank you. So as Executive Director of the State Bar, my job is to continually monitor society trends. And it's these trends that often determine how members engage with our association. So in a nutshell, I'm trying to figure out what moves you all to attend a CLE or come to a meeting, right? I'm trying to predict your behavior, which is pretty difficult when you think about the range and the types of attorneys and humans and people we have within our ranks, right? As a broad-based organization, very, very difficult. But in studying these trends and watching these societal behaviors, these are the same things that are impacting legal professionals and the workforce. So if you are in a position of having a staff and having to hire and retain and recruit, the things we are studying and the things we are watching are the same things that are impacting your ability to do the same thing. So as I talk to other executives from around the country, and I attend conferences and I spend hours upon hours studying generational differences and what motivates people, the hows and the whys, we felt it would be helpful to share that information with you because what we feel and what we see is the same thing really that's impacting you. So I attended a national conference last month, and I'm going to share some data from that national conference. And it really is, and it was about membership, and it was about bar associations. It was a conference of bar leaders. And all of this data that we shared was about membership and membership behavior and membership engagement. But really, it's about your partners, your workforce, your associates, because that's what our data reflects. And so there's been this unexpected detour in what was predicted from years ago. And some of you may have heard this term, the silver tsunami. There was this prediction that it was lawyers were aging out, they were retiring, or worse yet. But nonetheless, we would see the silver tsunami where the aging population of this profession would disrupt the legal, the delivery system of legal services. But what's happened is it really hasn't happened as predicted. It will still happen at some point in time, one way or the other, but more gradually. What's actually happened is people are choosing to leave the profession for various reasons. And so one of the pieces of data that was shared was from a company called ALPS. So this is you may have heard of them, some of you. It's a malpractice company. They sell malpractice insurance, but they operate way out west, which is great because we love Rittman here, right, in Indiana. Big Rittman fans, great. So according to this data from ALPS, when they were talking to people about renewing their malpractice insurance and gathering the reasons why people were or were not renewing, 22% of the people who chose not to renew their malpractice insurance said that they were doing so because they were leaving private practice. They were getting out of the profession altogether or moving to government sector, in-house counsel positions, but they were leaving private practice altogether. And these were not older attorneys, because of that 22%, those who said they were leaving, less than half were retiring, or actually they didn't renew because of a death. So of that 22%, less than half were leaving because of age-related issues. Right? So why were they leaving? And that's what we're going to talk about today. There are two huge factors that are driving the decision for people to leave the legal profession. One is generational differences, generational expectations, and we're going to talk about that because it's the foundation of how the external environmental circumstances, such as the pandemic, how those things impact individuals is often rooted in how they see the world. So it's those two factors that are most critical, I think, to understand. So we're going to talk about generational expectations, and I have 20 minutes. So this is going to be a high-level, super glossy overview, and I'm happy to talk about any of this in more detail if anyone would like to do so. And you can contact me. I'm pretty easy to find, and I'm happy to talk about it. So one, generational expectations, and then the second thing, which is more environmentally focused, is the Great Reassessment. You've probably all heard that term, right? Everybody's reevaluating their life. Why am I doing what I'm doing? This is actually nothing new. Specifically in the legal profession, this is nothing new. I'm sure all of you at some point in your time thought, why am I doing this again? Why am I working all of these hours? Why am I putting myself through this? So all of those questions are not new, but the pandemic really just sped it all up, more or less. So we're going to talk about generational differences first. Oops. So generational expectations and the Great Reassessment. Oh, and one thing I want to touch on about the Great Reassessment, what we're seeing in terms of movement is attorneys typically are moving from big law to small law to out of law, right? Big law, small law, out of law. And small law, I think, can be defined as smaller firms, maybe in-house, maybe government, but it's going from big law, small law to out of law. So first of all, we're going to talk about generational differences. There's a lot on this slide, and so I realize that, and the text is probably really small, so I'm going to give you the highlights of the big differences between the generations, and I cannot stress this enough. This is a really broad brush point of view. This describes everyone, but no one in particular, right? So when we talk about these generational differences, they're general scientifically based constructs, but this really doesn't define an individual. So never assign these characteristics to an individual. Not all boomers are afraid of technology. Not all millennials are slackers. If we can all agree to that, this is just general concepts, we'll all be better off. But the goal here is to give you some understanding of what you're experiencing on the whole, not necessarily with a single employee, but it's possible. Yep. I can share these. Yeah, absolutely. We're happy to. And I actually have a lot more slides than this because you guys are getting the Cliff's Notes version. So anyway, but the goal here is to give you some understanding. And the other thing I would say to keep in mind is when we talk about generations and generational differences, don't think so much about the dates and think more about the mindset, right? There are a lot of Gen Xers out there who think like Gen Z. There's a lot of Gen Zers out there who think like boomers, right? But as you talk to individuals and you start to see trends within your own firm or within the industry, you can start to understand this is that type of mindset. So that's what we're going to focus on today. And I'm going to get, like I said, don't get hung up on the dates here, but I'm going to go over some of the high level stuff. So baby boomers, generally speaking, born 1946 to 1964. Here's what drives them when it comes to workplace values. They value workplaces that have hierarchies, more or less. They grew up in an environment where professionals started at the bottom and they worked their way up to the top. They paid their dues. That's the way it was done. Career advancement is a status symbol. That's very, very important to boomers and older generation. Men of this generation viewed themselves as a family provider. Women actually made up 45% of the labor force. Baby boomer generation, 45% of the women made up the labor force. But most were not a job that required a degree. They were supportive in nature. Money and titles often took precedent over happiness. Specifically with men of this generation, their happiness and pride came from what they were able to achieve at their workplace, right? And they made sacrifices to do so. Quick synopsis of the boomers. Gen Xers, that's me. Anybody else Gen Xers in the room? Woo, woo. Latchkey kids, the forgotten generation. We love to brag about it all the time. We, not as many as the boomers, we did not have the numbers as the boomers. So we adopted the work culture that the boomers told us was the work culture, right? We fell in line more or less. We didn't necessarily always agree with it, but we did fall in line with it. We were the first generation of latchkey kids. So both of our parents most likely worked, which left us home alone a lot to figure things out on our own. Men of this generation still largely viewed their role as the primary breadwinner, largely, but most expected their spouses to work. And that's where it started to change. Women grew up in an environment where girls could be anything they wanted to be, and women were earning more bachelor's degrees than men. So in the Gen X generation, there are more women with bachelor's degrees than men. Career advancement and opportunity and money were still primary drivers for the Gen X generation. So when you think about your firms and you're thinking about who are the people who really want to rise up the ranks and become partner, Gen Xers probably fit this bill. Boomers certainly do. We start talking about millennials and Gen Z, the dynamic starts to change a little bit, right? So let's get into the millennials. Born roughly 1977 to 1995. Millennials are the result of Gen Xers. And this is the important thing to understand and why. As latchkey kids, Gen Xers had a desire to be more involved with their children than their parents were with them. Gen Xers were often left on their own. Gen Xer parents said, I will not do that to my children. I will be involved in your lives. Gen X generation gave rise to the helicopter parenting. Gen Xers are helicopter parents, right? We are involved in everything. And the desire of Gen Xers was that their children were fulfilled, seen, heard. Millennial children dictated the social calendars of Gen Xers. If you think about if you're a Gen Xer and if you're a boomer and you think about who your friends were, the kids you played with, they were most likely neighborhood friends, people maybe you met at church, or they were children of your parents' friends. Your parents dictated the children's social construct. For Gen Xers, the kids dictate the social construct. Gen Xer friends are people they've met through their kids' dance activities, through travel sports, right? So the whole social system of Gen Xers is surrounded, and the kids are the center of the universe. And this is very, very important to understand. The other thing I think that was really important to take into account when we start talking about in the context of the workforce, the proliferation of bank-backed credit cards hit the scenes in the 1980s. So while millennials were growing up and Gen Xers had a deep desire to make sure their children were fulfilled, seen, and heard, they were then given the ability to do it instantly, right? Instant gratification. Pay now, buy now, pay later became a normal thing in the 1980s, really became popular. Then in 2008, the market crashed, right? So you had families lose their homes. Millennials saw their family, their parents lose their jobs. They saw their friends' parents lose their jobs. They saw hard economic times. And what they learned was that financial security was not guaranteed. So unlike the Xers and the boomers who were taught work hard, you'll achieve great things and you'll have money, millennials didn't see that. What they saw were people who were working hard. They didn't rise to the level of success financially. They saw their parents go bankrupt. They saw their parents lose their house. So in their heads, there is no guarantee of financial security, even if they work hard. Additionally, and this was because Gen Xers wanted our kids to be fulfilled and seen and heard, we pushed college hard, and the school corporations did too. And rightfully so, college is great. And that was a way that we encouraged them to go out, be anything you want to be, go to college. But for many millennials, because of the 2008 market crash, the only way to do that, student loans. It's the only way to go to college and in their eyes, be fulfilled. So millions and millions and millions of millennials took out student loans to get to college. And then at the same time, what colleges were requiring for admission was public service. Where have you volunteered? What have you done? Right? Have you helped fix your park, your local community? So what ended up happening when you roll all of these factors together with the millennial generation is that they have a really strong desire to make the world better. Their work really needs to make a difference. They value workplaces that are collaborative, achievement-oriented, positive, diverse, fun, flexible, continuously providing feedback. And this is the key takeaway, millennials value happiness over everything else. But what they define as happiness is different than what Xers and boomers define as happiness. And in their world, time is their currency. Time is their happiness, because that's the only way they can guarantee that they're going to be happy or fulfilled is to give them time to do it. They need money to pay off their debt. So I'm here to tell you that they don't care about money, because that's not true. But millennials as a generation do not desire money as a way to gather wealth. They desire money as a way to get out of debt, to give them the freedom to do what they want to do. So it's all about driving happiness. We're going to move on to Gen Z real quick. So that's 1996 to now. This blew my mind. It may not blow your mind, but much research is done on this group yet. So they're about 27 years old, would be the oldest. So new associates just coming out, right? So we don't have a whole lot of workforce related data on them, but they are true digital natives. Most of them do not know life before social media. So they were born into Twitter. I know. So, but because of this, what this means is their world is smaller.
It's very easy for them to get on their phone and figure out what's happening in Ukraine. Right? They have a complete understanding of what's happening in the world around them, whereas millennials didn't, and they didn't need to or care to because they were the center of the universe, and the Xers and Boomers didn't necessarily have the ability to do so. So Gen Z generation, their world is smaller. They have broader experiences than any other generation before them because they can see what's happening. They can get input from anywhere. And because of this, they're exposed to so many different diverse perspectives. What they are trying to do is search for their own truth. So this is a generation, some calling it the first true generation. I actually don't know what that means. But this is a generation that is really out there searching for their truth. They value individual expression. They avoid labels. They're more likely to keep their minds open and talk and discuss and actually be sincere about getting somebody else's opinion, but they push back on social constructs that have identity tied to it. And some of these things, the way they're playing out, what you'll see is a pushback on gender identity, racial construct, female roles in society, and family structure. So the things that we as boomers and Xers just came to know and expect, and this is how we operate and this is our system, they push back on that. Right? They don't want to be identified or labeled. They mobilize in causes they believe in. They make decisions in a highly analytical and pragmatic ways. And if they don't understand why they're asked to do something, they're reluctant to do it. You can't explain the why, it's going to be really hard to motivate them, right? They have to understand why they're doing. But they believe dialogue is important. And the other thing that's interesting about this group is the sense of community is a key driver in their decision making. What that means is they have to believe in the products they buy, not just because it's a good product, but because of what the company stands for. Right? So the sense of community is really, really important. What's important to point out here, though, is that when I say they're in search of their truth, it's their truth. It's not the truth. It's not your truth. It's their truth, right? So they're still very much individuals. But this is really, these generational differences are the foundation of what you're seeing today and how they respond to these external forces, such as the pandemic. So we're going to go on to the Great Reassessment. Right? So you've heard this term. Show of hands, who's heard this term? Reevaluating life. Yeah. So the Great Reassessment, long before COVID, as you all know, millennials. How many in here are millennials and are already mad at me using the term millennials over and over? Yes. Yes, hands are high. Yes, I know. I'd rather be a millennial. I know. But long before, and again, broad brush, I'm not talking about you, Heather, specifically, right? Just we, us. But long before COVID, millennials were bucking the traditional corporate structure. So firms were already experiencing hiring and retention problems before the pandemic, right? I'm sure many of you were. And so this isn't really new. But the challenge is millennials are the largest generation of the workforce. They make up more than anyone else. So they dictate the terms, like it or not, more or less. So they were already placing a premium on happiness, work-life balance, those sorts of things. And so when we talk about what is happiness, depending on how you're looking at this in the workforce, what I would describe this happiness concept as work-life balance. I mean, that's a term we've all heard, right? Well-being, right? Are you taking care of me? And we're going to get into it in a minute about some of how this actually is presenting itself in your workforce. But it's not a coincidence that these terms and the movements they represent have become more popular, because now what's happening is millennials are actually moving into the partner ranks and they're becoming the decision makers, right? So as they move up, more of these things, more of these concepts we talk about, they're going to become more commonplace in the workforce. And so the desire, this is something that's really important too, I wanted to hit on. The desire for work-life balance is even more prevalent in women who are exiting the profession at a much, much, much higher rate than men. What's really concerning about that, outside of that it's already concerning, is that more women are graduating law school than men. So because of the current structure and the current climate, and because women more so than men are not finding happiness in their work, the largest possible labor pool that we have is leaving at a higher rate. That's really problematic. Yes, that is true. And that was historically based on quote unquote military boomer models that made it really hard to be a mother and an attorney, which is a whole nother day's presentation. We won't get into that today. But the fact that the largest population of our potential labor force is leaving is really, really, really concerning and should be concerning to all of us. And then the current climate, well, I already said that. So anyway, COVID, coming back to the pandemic, forced everybody to reevaluate their lives. And when you talk about millennials, the question is, well, I'm reevaluating my life. Am I happy? Many of us Xers who were forced to work remote realized not so bad working remote, spending time with my family, right? So even older generations started adopting the mindset that maybe they once pushed back against. So when we talk about the great reassessment and the pandemic, and the question I asked is, what did we learn? Well, we learned that work could be done without a daily commute in many instances, right? Adopting certain tech could make us more efficient. Family time was actually kind of nice for many of us, unless you were at home also working and trying to help your kids with remote homework and, right, all of that. But I think the thing that it really taught us was tomorrow wasn't promised. And when you talk about people and time being their commodity, they're not going to waste it. Right? And so those bring up all of these questions. What am I doing with my life and why? And so how that presents itself in the workforce is practically overnight, power shifted from the employers who could dictate the rules to the employees who said there are other groups who can give me this and you can't, I'm out. So employees now dictate the terms of how corporations and organizations run, including the State Bar Association, right, and including many firms that are out there. So practically overnight, the power shifted, the workforce dictates the terms, and they are drawing hard lines between work and home. And as firms and as employers, if we can't find a way to strike that balance and make folks happy and allow them to work and be fulfilled and do things that they care about, it's going to be really, really hard to keep people around. So all of these terms are rooted in the things we've talked about before. They present themselves in these forms. So when you talk about, this is how it happens using a conversation, you're saying, hey, we'd like for you to come work for us. They will say, flexibility? What's my flexibility? More time off, remote work options. Are you going to take an investment in my professional development? It's your responsibility as my employer to give me training so that I can get better and probably leave you. That's the expectation, is that you invest in them as attorneys and as professionals. And you don't have to, but if you don't, you're not going to get them and they're probably going to leave, right? So anyway, professional development, leadership opportunities without paying their dues. Why would I have to sit here and wait for 20 years when I have things I can contribute right now? Because I was raised at a time where my opinion mattered and I was the center of the universe. I'm not waiting. If you make me wait, I'll go somewhere else, right? This is what's happening. Meaningful work that has a purpose. When you give somebody, a younger attorney, and say, do all this work, and they say, why am I doing this? And you say, because I had to, because I don't want to do it, because this is garbage work that associates do, they're gone. They're out, right? They're not going to stick around for it, most likely, because they don't necessarily have a desire to rise up to the rank of partner. They don't necessarily have a desire to pay their dues to climb higher, because that's not what drives them. They want a collaborative culture. They'll ask you about diversity and acceptance. They'll look at your webpage to see what your attorneys look like, to see what your staff looks like, because even if they are attorneys, white attorneys, attorneys not of color, younger generation, they care, and that matters to them. So when we talk about be it, see it, be it, we often think in terms of, well, we need to have attorneys of color so we can hire others attorneys of color. And what I'm telling you is, white attorneys look at that now. Younger white attorneys look at that and say, this organization doesn't support or believe in diversity. I'm going somewhere else that does. So it's not just that you may be losing attorneys of color, you may be losing all good candidates. And that's really important. And then, of course, well-being support and initiatives, that's also viable. So here are the things that the new generation won't accept: the concept of paying their dues, doing work that has little meaning, rigid schedules, a daily commute, little to no growth opportunity, little to no opportunity for input. They want to be heard, unreasonable work requirements, specifically to line somebody else's pockets, and bosses that don't care about them as a person. So I'm not trying to scare any of you, and I'm not telling any of you that you're doing it right or you're wrong. I'm telling you what the studies show and what's happening in the workforce, right? And that's going to be up to us to decide how we're going to react to that. So the question is, what can you do? Especially, I hear this a lot. Well, what do we do and why do we invest all this time and energy and money if they're going to leave anyway? That's a tough question to answer. And the reality is, if they're going to leave anyway, wouldn't you rather bank on them staying a little longer? Maybe they stick around, right? Maybe they stay longer. But to me, here's the value. If you create a great place to work and you create a really positive environment, when they get an opportunity and they do leave, they're going to talk good about you. They're going to be at state bar functions and they're going to say, I worked at this place and it was awesome. You should consider it, right? They're going to tell law students, you should try this place. It's great. So even if you have to fill your bucket of associates and of employees, you should have an easier time when your reputation is strong. And you get that reputation by being a good employer, okay? So what you can do, give them flexibility for family and personal life. Give them meaningful work. Even if it can't be every single case, allow them to do something that they care about once in a while. And I'm going to talk a little bit here about how the state bar can help do some of that, because you guys are not on your own, right? You're not on your own. And then give them an honest interest in their lives. Ask them how their families are doing. Invite their families to a picnic now and again invite them out to dinner, but take a true interest in their lives. And what you're going to get, hopefully, if you've hired the right people, happy, productive employees. The data says longer tenure, not forever tenure, but longer tenure, a strong reputation, and you will get ambassadors who will go out and talk well about your organization. And that's really what it's all about. So you're not alone. Here's how the State Bar can actually help you achieve some of these things, because this is a lot. You're all sitting in your partner meetings trying to figure out all of these things, and now you're dealing with these workforce issues. So when it comes to how do we give people meaningful work opportunities, how do we give them professional development, how do we give them leadership opportunities, the State Bar can do those things. We just heard a ton of information about pro bono opportunities, and many of our young attorneys actually are really excited about it, and some firms are using pro bono as a retention strategy. Give them time to do something that really, really matters to them, 2 hours a week, the rest of the time is yours, right? Which is really, really hard, and I understand it's a shift. But the State Bar can connect them with the pro bono opportunities, the foundation can. We can help them with professional development. We can give them leadership opportunities. We have sections, we have committees, we have the Leadership Development Academy, for goodness sakes. We can give them those leadership opportunities where they can express some of this stuff, be happy in their profession, even if your firm is not always in a position to give it. And then what you get, hopefully in return, again, happy, productive employees, longer tenure, strong reputation, and ambassadors for your firm. So that is the highlight of what I've learned. How many of you are scared? How many of you are frustrated? How many of you think this is a bunch of hooey? I bet you didn't think you'd hear the word hooey today, did you? No? All right. Well, you're not alone. The State Bar is here to help. But I hope that what we shared here was some information that gave you something to think about. Maybe at the very least, it explains some of what you're seeing and that you're not alone. And this is actually happening nationally. These are the conversations that are happening at national conferences. So with that, I'll close and say thank you. I really appreciate it. If you want to talk further, I'll be around. Thanks.
Thank you, Joe. ISBA sections and committees have done some amazing work this year, some of which you heard about in President Miller's report. I strongly encourage you to read the section and committee reports that are available on the ISBA website to learn about all of the work your association is doing for you, and there's a lot of it. Again, that link was shared with all delegates via email. So now it's time to formally elect our new House of Delegates Chair-elect. I'll invite to the podium Judy Calhoun of Muncie, Chair of the Nominations Committee, to share the committee's report.
Thank you, Judge Harvey, Chief Justice Rush, President Miller. And I'm really a Gen Xer, but I'd like to be a millennial for this one so I can say, I want my opinions heard. How's that? I listen. It is my pleasure. I served as the chair of the nominating committee for the House of Delegates. The others serving with me were Scotty Teal from Tippecanoe County, David Singleton from Allen County, Mitchell Osterday from Boone County, Christine Douglas from Hamilton County, Bonnie Adams from Warren County. If they're here, please stand, give us a wave, say thank you for your time and efforts. If not, if you see them, if you know them, tell them thank you. We had some wonderful people who had self-nominated and others that were suggested throughout the nomination committee, but we voted on our incoming candidate to be Seamus P. Boyce of Area 2. If he's elected as a chair-elected 2022 House of Delegates, he will serve 1 year as a member of the Board of Governors in capacity of chair-elect, and then assume the office of the chair at the close of the 2023 annual meeting, serving until the close of the 2024 annual meeting. I've known Seamus for years. He'll do a great job for this organization. Thank you.
Do I have a motion and second to accept the committee's recommendation? It has been moved and seconded to accept the committee's recommendation that Seamus Boyce be elected as chair-elect of the House of Delegates. Is there any discussion about that? Are you ready for the question? All those in favor of Mr. Boyce being chair-elect, please say aye. Those opposed say nay. Or no. Yes, that's right. Anybody on the call also? It sounds like the motion passed. Congratulations, Mr. Boyce. Is there any unfinished business to place before the House? Any new business that anyone would like to raise? Please come to the mic.
And maybe I should have brought this up while the guys that understand tax were up here. But the addendum this week talked about an amendment that has to do with making lawyers subject to banking laws. And I'm wondering if we should ask the association to take a position on that, because apparently some states are, or is that a matter that simply the Board of Governors should address?
The board did vote yesterday to do that.
Yes, and Ms. Buck, would you like to report that?
I'm happy to. The board did discuss that yesterday and voted unanimously to take a stance on that against it.
Thank you. Thank you for raising that. Any other new business? Well, I would like to thank you all for being very engaged this afternoon. I really appreciated the opportunity to chair the House of Delegates this year. I want to thank President Miller for a very productive year, and good luck in your next journey. Also would like to thank the ISBA staff for the very hard work that they always put in to put a great meeting together. So I would like to give them a thanks. So as my final act as House of Delegates Chair, I'd like to invite incoming Chair Anka Hinshaw to join me at the podium. Anka was elected by the House of Delegates last year to follow me as chair, and I would like to now pass the gavel and allow your new chair to wrap things up.
I'm representing all the millennials, so thank you very much. Thank you, Judge Harvey. I look forward to serving the House in the upcoming year. Thank you for volunteering your time to attend the meeting today and providing your perspectives on the new opportunities and challenges we heard about today. I'd like to thank our partners for supporting this year's annual summit. It wouldn't be possible without them. They are the Indiana Bar Foundation, LawPay, the ISBA Employer Association, Rittman, and Springer Professional Employer Organization. Please join us at 3:45 for the membership assembly meeting taking place in the Cityway Gallery on the first floor. We will elect our new Board of Governors and induct Amy Noe Dudas as State Bar's 127th president. At 5 p.m., we will conclude the summit with a reception. We hope you will join us. This meeting is adjourned.